third and last panel of the conference will going to be about the Christian communities residing in the Middle East. The moderator of this panel is going to be Val Taji Miller, visiting fellow at the Danube Institute, who is also a PhD student in neuroscience. As part of his work here, he writes about religious, political, and demographic issues from both a scientific and a Christian perspective. Val, please come to the floor, and I would also like to ask the speakers of the panel to take their seats.
So, as this is unfortunately going to be our last event of the day, as we're missing a speaker, I'd like to open this with a dedication to three great religions. I'll begin with the first, the oldest. Baruch Hashem Adonai, in nomine Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, or for our Arabic colleagues, Bismillah Ab wal Ibn wal Ruh al Qudus. And finally, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. These are dedications of three of the most important religions of the world. And one of them, Christians, is the religion we're here to talk about today. Violence against Christians is the theme of today's conference. But who are Christians? Christians are people who live, laugh, and love much like the rest of us. They bleed, they sweat, and they cry. It is fitting that as our final panel of today, rather than talking about violence or state security issues, we will hear from experts on the topic about Christian life in the Middle East, where it has come from, where it is today, and where it's going. I would like to introduce our panelists one by one, after which I would appreciate a warm welcome. The first guest I'd like to invite is Toma Ejbera, who is the regional manager of Hungary Helps for the Middle East. The second speaker I would like to invite to come up and take his seat is Father Rifat Badr, who is the director and editor-in-chief of the Jordan-based Catholic Center for Studies in Media. The third guest I would like to invite to take his seat is Father Benedict Keeley, who's the founder and director of Nazarian.org. And last but not least, the fourth guest I would like to invite to come take her seat is Sarah Sava, the Deputy Director General of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch and all the East. I would now like to invite Mr. Toma Ejbera to take the stand and deliver the first presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Danube Institute and Mr. Jeffrey and our distinguished guests, my warm greetings. When Mr. Jeffrey reached me to participate in this conference, the first idea came to my mind is to talk about my personal experience about the impact of our projects and to focus about the hope and positive things. And my topic is Hungary Helps Mission of Love. As you know, Hungary is a relatively small country in terms of geographical area, but this didn't prevent it from playing a significant role. Despite the historical events that affected Hungary, this country has continued to play a remarkable role through its great and kind-hearted people, as it did in the past. Today, through the Hungary Helps Agency, Hungary has moved to another level in defending human values against immigration and refugees trade, and providing a vital support toward people in the Middle East without any discrimination. The Hungarian values of solidarity and love towards different nations can be summarized in its slogan, how can we help? The Hungary Helps Agency established on 14th of April 2019. Personally, I started as a volunteer and currently I'm working as a regional projects manager for the Middle East. My role is to support our programs in the field with our partners, which positively affects vulnerable people, and to support humanitarian aid projects. Our donations support different components of society, not only churches or Christian organizations, but also all people without any discrimination. Our projects in Middle East include, as you saw in the screen, healthcare, food baskets, elderly care, education, supporting micro-projects, abroad scholarships, livelihood, sustained projects, constructions and renovations. Based on the above, we are working to establish our regional office in Jordan to support our partners in the region. Why Jordan? Jordan is a home to some of the oldest Christian communities in the world. Their presence dating to the 1st century. Today, Christians make up about 4% of population, a significant drop from 20% in 1930, but their absolute numbers have increased. This is due to high immigration rates of Muslims into Jordan, high immigration rates of Christians, and higher birth rates among Muslims. Jordanian Christians number around 250,000, most of them home ethnically Arab. 50% of Jordanian Christians belong to the Eastern Orthodox Church, while Catholic and Protestants make up the other 50%. Considering in the last 10 years, there has been an influx of few thousand of Christian refugees fleeing from ISIS, mainly from Mosul, Iraq. Jordan's Arab Christians are exceptionally well integrated in the Jordanian society and enjoy a high level of freedom. Christians are allocated a minimum of 7% of the seats in the Jordanian parliament, 9 out of 130 seats, significantly greater than their percentage of the total Jordanian population. Jordanian Christians also hold important ministerial portfolios as ambassadors at their position high-ranking, also in military rank. The highest position reached by a Jordanian Christian is Deputy Prime Minister. And Jordanian Christians are allowed by the public and private sectors to leave their work to attend Mass on Sundays. All Christians' religious ceremonies are publicly celebrated in Jordan. Christians have established good relations also with the royal family and the various Jordanian government officials, and they have their own court for matters for personal status. Furthermore, Jordan is a stable and safe country located in the heart of the Middle East, and due to these reasons and atmosphere, our office plays a vital role in Amman. Here are some examples of our projects, which I call it the impact of the project in Jordan. Improving health conditions and welfare for different refugees and vulnerable host communities' families. Promoting better access to education and improve the quality of education for refugees and vulnerable host communities' students. Developing livelihood opportunities, promoting financial development, employment, and decent work to the refugees and vulnerable host communities' families. Contributing to building the new churches, especially the baptism site and Greek Catholic Church in Amman. Dear Mr. Jeffrey and our distinguished guests, before I close my presentation, please allow me to present this short video which explains why Hungary Helps is a mission of love.
Ladies and gentlemen, give us a moment here.
Can we have a higher volume, please?
أنا زلمة فقير وعايش مع الفقراء. لا أنا بجوا بيقولوا لي أنت مثلا إنسان مريض، لا أنا ماني مريض. أنا بدي أروح أشتغل، أنا بدي أشتغل. اسمي فتح الله عبد الله قويت من مدينة حلب. كنت أشتغل بزماني بالصياغة بالذهب. أخذت هون محل أجاور الزلمة كمان سافر لألبانيا، قال لي هي فاتح المحل ضل بالمحل انت اخذ بيت اباجور مشان يطلعني ابني ويدخلني هالدرجتين واجي اكمل مسيره بحياتي. ما بدي ابرغ بالبيت استنى راح يعني ليجي فرج الله. حق دواء بالشهر 90,000. عندي عضلة القلب بتشتغل 30%. أنا بدي أروح على الشغل، أنا بدي أشتغل. وأنا بإذن الله مستمر بالشغل، والله كتر خيرهم الهنغاري هيل.
This person motivates me personally. As you can see, he's sick and he refused to left Aleppo. He stayed there. And really, he affects me positively. And at the end, I want to thank everyone who worked hard for the success of this conference. And God bless you all. Ishten Aldio Monir Sagut. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ejbara, for that incredible talk. I'd like now to welcome our next guest, Father Rifat Beder.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey and Danube Institute. Thanks for Mr. Toma, who presented our country in a very nice way. And he was the one who introduced me to Mr. Jeffrey and invited us after many delays for the conference. But here we are in Budapest. Thank you very much. I want not to focus on the present or on the past, but to look with you to the future, because we saw a lot of pain, a lot of sufferings in our societies. Every society, every country has pains, and especially it is more painful when it is because of the religious persecution. You know, the liberty or the right of religious freedom is the most sacred freedom inside the heart of every human being. When he or she are persecuted upon their beliefs, this is a more painful thing. I want to talk about the year 2012 and then to jump to the future together. Why we talk about 2012? It was the signature of the apostolic exhortation of Pope Benedict XVI. It was in Harissa, in Lebanon, in the day of the exaltation of the cross feast, the 14th of September. Next week, we will celebrate the 10 years after the signature of the apostolic exhortation about the church in the Middle East, communion and witness. The synod sessions ended in the Vatican on Sunday, October 24th, 2010. On the next Sunday, unfortunately, October 31, one of the worst terrorist massacres took place at Our Lady of Salvation Church in Baghdad, resulting in the martyrdom of many people. The most important content of the apostolic exhortation are: the Middle East, without Christians or with a small number of them, is not the Middle East. We can imagine how will be the Middle East when it would be, for God's sake, one color. So this, I repeat always, the lack of Christians, the disappearing of Christians in the Middle East will not be a tragedy against the Christians. It will be a tragedy for all the people in the Middle East, because they will lack the partnership with the other. Would be no more dialogue, no more citizenship, and no more mutual respect when it would be one color. Second, the religious freedom, which is more advanced than tolerance, is the crown or pinnacle of all freedoms. We agree about this, that religious freedom is the most sacred freedom inside the human hearts. Indeed, in recent years, several questions have arisen about the Christians of the East. Sometimes we talk about the problem of Christians in the East, or the Middle Eastern problem, which is the Palestinian problem, but also we hear now the Christians in the Middle East. Through the ages, Christians have been subjected to numerous harassments. When we talk in these years about the persecution of Christians from the Islamist groups, we forget sometimes to talk also about the Christians in Palestine, who were also forced to leave their country because of the occupation. The Israeli occupation also was not less dangerous for the Christians than the Islamist groups. But in these years, when we talk about persecution, we mention always just the Islamist groups, but we are not just when we forget the main problem in the Middle East, the core of the problems sometimes in the world. And as King Abdullah says always, the peace in Jerusalem will be the key for the peace in the whole international community. Okay. We agree that the Christians are a small numbers. As Mr. Toma also described the Christians in Jordan, we are not more than 4%. In all the Middle East, we are not numerous. But we talk about the light of the world and the salt of the earth. As Jesus Christ described this minority of Christians to be always the light and the salt. Let me go directly to the future, because the future is the main idea of what we are talking in this respected conference. These are some dates of the history of the patriarchs of conferences that we held in Jordan or in the Middle East about the Christians in the Middle East, but I want to focus just on the future of these Christians. Can we talk about the future, not of the Christians in the Middle East, but the future in the Middle East for the Christians? And of course, not only for the Christians, but as I mentioned, for everybody. It is the same future that awaits their societies. But we can talk about 7 points. The future is built by preserving diversity. Diversity inside the churches and diversity inside the societies. Interreligious dialogue or interdenominational also dialogue inside the church is the main key or a main key from the keys to look to the future. Preserving diversity doesn't mean that there will be disputing, but there will be dialogue, there will be interaction. Second, the future is built by the continuous strengthening of the values of equality and citizenship. Of course, we always talk about majority, minority, common living, tolerance, coexistence, but in these years, we are focusing on the main key, which is citizenship. Citizenship doesn't mean that I am loyal or not for my country. I am loyal, of course, but citizenship is the play between rights and duties. I have rights to ask from my society, and I have duties to do for my society. Sometimes we ask the citizens in the Middle East, give us all your duties, but without the right to ask for his or her rights. Here I quote from the Apostolic Exhortation. The Catholics of the Middle East, which is the Christians in general, the majority of whom are native citizens of their countries, have the duty and right to participate fully in national life, working to build up their country. They should enjoy full citizenship and not be treated as second-class citizens or believers. We suffer when we feel that some citizens in some specific countries are feeling that they are second class in their societies. Third, the future is built by promoting positive experiences in our dear East. We have nice and successful experiences and stories in our Middle East. We have to strengthen these stories. We here talk about King Abdullah II, who received a lot of awards in the world. Last one was with an institution in America, and also the Human Fraternity in Emirates, and also the Light of Peace in Assisi. Such a person is respected everywhere because he is a man of dialogue and a man of peace. Fourth, the future is built by maintaining contacts and extending bridges of affection and cooperation between the Christians of the East who remained in their native countries and their brethren who immigrated, whatever it was voluntary or based on forced displacement. We encourage the Christians to stay in their homeland, but sometimes the decision is not in their own decision or in home. Sometimes they are displaced. Sometimes they are forced to immigrate. That's why we have now the 50% of the Christians of the East are now everywhere in the diaspora. Imagine the Iraqi refugees, whom we received. About 10,000 of Christians from Mosul came to Jordan. Now we still have 4,000 of these people. The 6,000 immigrated to Australia, to Sweden, I think to Hungary, to America, and to Canada. We have to work together and to think together how we can build bridges of cooperation between the Christians who stayed in their homeland, as the one shown by Tu'ma in the nice film, or those who immigrated forcibly or voluntarily to the diaspora. How we can make bridges of cooperation in the future. The future is built by consolidating the ecumenical effort or unity among the churches. This is the image 4 months ago in Egypt for the meeting of the Council of Churches in the Middle East. They gather 4 families of Christians: the Catholic family, the Orthodox family, the Orthodox Eastern family, and the Protestant family together. This is the image of ecumenical effort that the Middle East is working on. We have to keep this ecumenical efforts, because without it, there will be the division of Christians. The future is built by continuing efforts in the various countries of the East to set the basis of the stable and enduring values of democracy. Without democracy, there will be no equality. So we encourage our societies, not our churches or our mosques, but our societies and our political leaders to put more democracy in order to help anybody to feel equal with the others. The last point is the future is built through cooperation with the Christians of the West and with financial support. I thank on your presence Hungary Helps for all their efforts. And here some pictures of the former ambassador of Hungary, who also patronized a lot of activities in our country. We need sometimes helps for the institutions in our countries in order to have the courage to encourage people to stay in their homeland, and Hungary is playing a good role. Thank you very much. At the end, just to quote from the apostolic exhortation that I encourage everybody to read it in a new way after 10 years of the signature. The Catholics of the Middle East, the majority of whom are native citizens of their countries, have the duty and right to participate fully in national life, working to build up their country. They should enjoy full citizenship and not be treated as second-class citizens or believers. Christians are concerned for the fundamental rights of the human person. It is wrong to claim that these rights are only Christian human rights. They are nothing less than the rights demanded by the dignity of each human person and each citizen, whatever his or her origins, religious convictions, and political preferences. Thank you for adding 1 minute for me. Thank you.
I think I can speak for everyone and say that you're very welcome. And our third speaker for the night will be Father Benedict Keeley, coming from England, who is here to talk to us about Nesarian.org.
Thank you again to everyone from the Danube Institute. I'd particularly like to thank John O'Sullivan, who's not here, but Melissa's here, because he actually invited me initially in Brussels, so we miss him. I'm here not just because he asked me. By the way, I congratulate your stamina for the ones who stayed right to the end. The espressos helped, I'm sure. But my full-time work as a priest, a Catholic priest, is aid and advocacy for the persecuted. And I've been to Iraq 8 times, Syria and Lebanon. I first went to Iraq in early 2015. It was rather interesting getting on the plane from Vienna to Erbil because there was just me and about 10 or 15 guys in khaki with beards, Americans. So I wonder what they were doing. It's just a priest. And the stewardess said you can sit anywhere. It was really nice on that plane. But I've been working also a lot with Hungary Helps, the Hungarian government, with Tristan from the beginning. And I want to begin by holding up a figure who I know is very dear to all Hungarians, the servant of God, Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty, who's a very special figure for me, but also, I would say, a very special figure for all our work on Christian persecution. I would say, yeah, I knew I'd get the Hungarians to clap. It's called feeding the crowd, you know. But I would say that he should actually be a patron of our work, particularly in Hungary, and pray for his beatification, maybe during the papal visit. Cardinal Erdo described Cardinal Mindszenty as the symbol of the entire tormented and oppressed Hungarian nation. But so much more. I'd ask you to think of the words which are written on Cardinal Mindszenty's grave in Esztergom. De victus vincit. Defeated, he is victorious. Defeated, he conquers. This, friends, is the essence of martyrdom, Christian martyrdom. And it's also the story of Christianity from the beginning until the Lord's second coming. Many of you will know the great patriarch of the Syrian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Ignatius Ephraim. I was with him just a week ago, and also with your wonderful president, Novak. Patriarch Ephraim is a very jolly and very kind man, despite the awful suffering of the Syrian people. But always when he gives a talk, he talks about the church having 5 marks. We know the church has 4 traditional marks. The church is 1, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. But Patriarch Ephraim always says the 5th mark of the church is that she is persecuted. Remember, it was the Lord's promise that we would be persecuted. Now, that doesn't mean we don't fight for our brethren and we don't attempt to alleviate the suffering in the name of our brethren and in the name of justice. The heading of this talk is The Witness of the East, Why Western Christianity Needs the Martyrs. But of course, it's not just the witness of the East. It's the witness of martyrdom per se. but it's particularly relevant for us in the West, where, as the historian Belloc wrote, our Christianity has become somewhat sluggish, somewhat lazy, somewhat complacent. The witness, not just of the Eastern Christians in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, inspires us, but also the witness of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, who suffered such intense persecution under communism, the witness of our brethren in Nigeria and so much of Africa, where the slaughter of Christians is reaching genocidal status. And the West, the Western media in particular, yawns and goes on about climate change. Along with Patriarch Ephraim, I was privileged last week to be with Bishop Jude of the Diocese of Ondo in Nigeria. You might remember we heard during our talk on Pentecost Sunday this year, jihadist gunmen martyred more than 40 men, women, and children at Mass. Following that terrible incident, just one of thousands of attacks happening in Nigeria all the time, the President of Ireland, President Michael Higgins, a hobbit-like fellow, but without the intelligence of a hobbit, sent what will go down as one of the most crass, ignorant, and absurd letters of condolence in recent history. In part, he blamed the attack on the effects of climate change. Bishop Jude, whose diocese it was, responded that 40 of his people were not murdered at Mass because of climate change. Yet this same absurd nonsense is regularly spouted by other governments and, of course, the mainstream media. Devictus vincit. Defeated, he is victorious, or he conquers. I think the main purpose of why the Western Church, all of us, need the martyrs, will come from a true understanding of what martyrdom is. I have an elderly clerical friend who describes himself as a martyr to his stomach. Now, there are many reasons why one might become a martyr, but to bear witness, which is what martyrdom means, to bear witness to the needs of the colon seems fairly low on the list. He also orders his beer in the pub in half-pint glasses, which in England is a very bad sign. The word martyr or martyrdom is used wisely today. Militant Islam uses the term martyr or shaheed to describe someone who blows themselves up while also trying to kill as many other people as possible. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews encourages Christians in the 12th chapter to persevere and run the race of the faith, precisely because we are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, both the men and women of faith in the Old Testament and the witnesses who have given all for Christ. Monsignor Ronald Knox, one of the great preachers of the last century, wrote that a martyr means someone who dies not merely to bear witness, but to bear witness to the truth. That distinction is essential for a proper understanding of martyrdom. It's the reason why Christians should be inspired, encouraged, and edified by the martyrs, both of centuries ago and the many modern martyrs of today. The Church has always taught that the purpose of canonization is, apart from honoring the saint and asking for their prayers, to be an exemplar and a source of encouragement to live the Christian life. The martyr, the man, the woman, or the child who dies because of their faith in Christ is, it can be argued, the greatest source of encouragement to persevere, as Hebrews says, and in modern terminology, the very best of role models. If real martyrdom involves bearing witness to the truth, then a fortiori, you cannot be a martyr either to your stomach or, more seriously, to militant Islam or indeed any other cause or faith. A shaheed cannot, in any sense, equate with a Christian understanding of martyrdom. Someone who sets themselves on fire for the cause of climate change may have very profound beliefs, but they're not martyrs. Recently, the great writer Douglas Murray, who's well known here, said that if we heard a Scandinavian teacher had emerged from the woods with dire and terrible warnings that the world would be destroyed in 12 years, we'd all say how terrible those Middle Ages were. And yet we know that was what Greta said. Climate change activists are not martyrs. What is truth, said that most contemporary of politicians, Pontius Pilate, when truth was standing in front of him. It is bearing witness to the truth that there is no name under heaven by which we can be saved except the name of Jesus Christ, and to be willing to die for that truth that makes someone a martyr. That's the Christian faith. From the very beginning of the church, the veneration of the martyrs has been an inspiration. That's why those first Christians gathered in the catacombs to celebrate Mass around the graves of the martyrs. Today, every altar in every Catholic church contains relics of the martyrs, both to sanctify the altar and to connect us with that ancient witness. The modern martyrs of the faith, dying in their thousands in Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, to name but a few, are bearing witness to the truth, a truth that sets them free. Who can fail to be inspired, for example, by the witness to the truth of Asia Bibi, that illiterate Pakistani woman who was freed after all those years on death row in Pakistan? She was charged with blasphemy, but her real crime was to bear witness to the truth. Similarly, in Iraq, the soon-to-be beatified Father Ragid Ghani, Steve is one of the postulators of his cause. Father Ragid Ghani martyred in Mosul in 2007, along with 4 subdeacons after celebrating Mass. As his murderers approached him, they demanded of Father Ragid why he had failed to close the church when they'd ordered him to do it. His response, "How can I close the church of God?" is one of the most powerful signs of witness in the modern age. A beautiful witness. In the Martyr's Service to the Truth, Ronald Knox also reminds contemporary Christians, especially of the West, of why the witness of the martyrs, is so important in a world of post-truth and fake news. These are his words. What the martyrs triumph over is not the fury of the persecutor. It is the spell of the things which persecution takes from them. They triumph over the attractiveness of peace, of ease, of liberty, of comfort, of companionship, of health, and finally, the greatest attraction of all, of life itself. Solzhenitsyn wrote that the worst thing about the Soviet communist system was that it forced everybody to participate in what he called the general conscious lie. That participation in the conscious lie is becoming ever more present in secular societies which deny eternal truth. In fact, this is what President Katalin Novak shared in Frascati last week, her experiences as a child here in Hungary, and her fear of the growing totalitarianism in the West, woke totalitarianism. It is the conscious lie of political correctness, the conscious lie of silence in the face of untruth. It is the forced silencing of opposite opinions on college campuses, the shaming of opponents, and the increased attacks on free speech. What the author Douglas Murray called in his book The Madness of Crowds is in reality the curtailing of the truth, the enforcement of the conscious lie. The witness of the martyrs is the antidote to the conscious lie. It is the inoculation which prevents the lie from taking hold and corrupting society with a leprous plague of falsehood. All of us, in moments of self-examination and humility, will admit to the fear of the things Knox listed being taken from us. Perhaps we might be willing to lose our peace or ease for the sake of the truth, but our liberty or life itself, surely that's asking too much. The one thing necessary the martyrs give us is the courage both to persevere and to be joyful in the Holy Spirit. Lift your drooping hands, strengthen your weak knees, the author of Hebrews writes. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. The martyrs of the past inspire, but their age can seem far removed from our own. It's very important, however, to remember that the church, as St. John Paul so wonderfully said, breathes with two lungs. St. Theodore of Tarsus, a Syrian, came to Canterbury, where I come from, in Anglo-Saxon England, to be the archbishop in the 7th century, there were between 640 and 740 no fewer than 6 Syrian popes. Sometimes we imagine the modern church is very open and multicultural, but I wonder if in fact we're very parochial, and it was the ancient church that was truly Catholic. What would happen, for example, if the Pope appointed as the next Archbishop of New York or Esztergom a bishop from Damascus or Beirut? I'd hazard he might have different priorities. The past is with us in the memory and the veneration of the martyrs, but the witness to the truth of the modern martyrs, especially those who suffered under the twin evils of Nazism and communism, should provide much needed encouragement and inspiration for us Christians. I conclude once more, ladies and gentlemen, with the words of Hilaire Belloc, that pugnacious historian, close friend of Chesterton, Catholic fighter who used his pen as a mighty sword, and even in those pre-war years would never sign up to the conscious lie. Belloc, remember, said that we Christians of the West were somewhat slack, somewhat sluggish. That was before the Second World War and before the Second Vatican Council. What would he say to us now? To us, before us, the martyrs stand, bearing witness to the truth, to the truth, a truth that sets us free. So be inspired, be encouraged, be strengthened. De victus vincit. Defeated, he is victorious.
Wonderful. I would like to actually apologize to Father Benedict because I bungled up the name of his organization and the name of his talk, but I must say I'm grateful for having made that mistake because what we got was much, much better for it. Now, I'd like to finish off with our final speaker tonight, after which we'll be moving on to an open debate and discussion amongst the panel and audience questions. Our final speaker will be Sarah Sava, who is coming to talk to us about the Mother Church rooting Christians in the Middle East.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's excited for the last piece. Sometimes they say the last is the best, or we keep the best to the last. On behalf of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch and all the East, I want to thank Danube Institute. I want to thank Jeffrey and the team for organizing yet another important and very special topic that not only Hungary should tackle, but the whole world, to be honest. Being intolerant or tolerant to a few issues is something, but this specific topic that actually might save lives one day, and to be aware of it is something I personally find really important. So when we talk about the Mother Church, I will briefly explain more historically before talking about the NGO that we run in Syria and the role that's playing nowadays after 11 years of crisis. I just want to say that when we talk about violence of Christians in the Middle East, I can only first start by remembering the apostles. After Jesus Christ ascended into heaven, the apostles faced horrible suffering and martyrdom just to spread the word of Christianity. So imagine if they were living today in this world with technology, airplanes, weapons of mass destruction, etc. How would they have spread the word? Question is, would they have defended themselves or would they have remained martyrs? Personally, I think that they would have remained martyrs. They wouldn't have wanted to fight back. They would have just accepted what's coming for them. So let's talk about history really briefly, where it all began. The first church of history after Jesus was crucified is the church of Antioch that was established by Saints Peter and Paul. Now, this church was up until the year 451 AD under the jurisdiction of the Patriarchate of Antioch, which is even the Church of Jerusalem. It was under the jurisdiction of Patriarchate of Antioch. This is the Church of Antioch originally. So this is where St. Peter and Paul were once walking, maybe having discussions, thinking about the future. And today, this is the Patriarchate of Antioch. Now, before I go further, I just want to clear a misconception that usually takes place when we travel and speak about our church. a lot of people ask if we speak Greek and if we belong to the Church of Greece, of Athens, and we say no. Our church is not originally called Greek Orthodox. If you have read about Christianity in the Quran, you would have probably read the word Rum. In English, they would say Roman Orthodox. Early theologians would say it was Roman Orthodox Church. Others said it's Byzantine Orthodox Church. So this is my church. So if I was to be asked, what denomination do you come from? I would say I am Rum Orthodox in Arabic, or Roman, or Byzantine. But Greek Orthodox was just a word that was used later on in the early centuries just to make it clear that we follow the same doctrine as that of the Greek Orthodox Church of Greece itself, and of course other Orthodox churches. Our current patriarch is Patriarch John X, and he is of course responsible, and he's the head of this church, which is also referred to as the Church of the Apostles, the Apostolic Church. Due to conflicts between empires, invasions over the centuries, Christians in the Middle East have had their share of unfortunate experience. You all know what happened in the Roman Empire. Most of the saints, most of the apostles of Jesus himself were tortured right here in the Colosseum in Rome in very, very inexplicable ways, I would say. Some were actually crucified, burned. Some were, eaten alive by wild animals. Then we have the Persian Empire invasion. Then we have the Mamluks. Then we have the Mongols. And of course, who can forget the Ottoman Empire invasion? I'm sure in Hungary, you have had your share, right? You were invaded by the Ottoman Empire maybe for more than 150 years. We did too in the Middle East. So you can imagine how it feels like not to be freed yet. And I'll go into more details with this specific point so you understand exactly what I'm saying. Today, we have a different way of invasion. And this way has come in different forms. Not very different to their ancestors, I would say. They still behead, they still capture women, they still rape, they still kill, they still burn alive, they still use all sorts of torture techniques to make it clear that they are in power and others are not. The current status of the church in Syria reminds me of this saying. It says, we are hard-pressed on every side, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but we're not in despair. Of course, we're persecuted, but not abandoned. Of course, we're struck down, but not destroyed. Christians in the Middle East are Christians that have really come up from the early Christians. They used to hide, they used to take care of themselves. They used to try to spread the word of Christianity, not only from Antioch to the rest of the world, but even in other regions of the Middle East. This is why the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch, or the Byzantine Orthodox Church, is called today the Mother Church. It's the only church that has actually, until this very date, it has kept the scripture and the doctrine of the church as written by saints Peter and Paul. They have not made any eliminations. They have not made any additions. They have not drifted away from this path that was really drawn and written by Jesus himself. This is why it's referred to as the Mother Church. A little bit of history. In 635 AD, Damascus became the capital of the Umayyad Caliphate. If we look at the map and we see the green, I'll look here, the green colors, let's say, or the green map, this is what they used to call, or what they still call, the Arabian Peninsula. So this is where the word Arabic or Arabs came from. A lot of people misconcept also that the Middle East is just fully Arabs and Arabic and they're all Muslims. This is very wrong. The Arabian Peninsula is right there. And then you can see the purple map. This was the Byzantine Empire with its capital in Constantinople. And so the black arrow refers to the army of the righteous caliphs. And the green arrows shows the army of Muhammad. And this is where they were actually living before they started, let's say, invading other rural areas. So Damascus, as I circled in yellow, was actually invaded in 635 AD. Now, what happened was Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was leading the army, stood at Bab Shar'i. Bab Shar'i in the old city of Damascus is the eastern gate. And this gate still exists until now, and the fence also still exists. So he entered with his army on the 30th of August, which is, in fact, last week. It's less than a week ago. And he massacred 40,000 Rum Christian Orthodox living in the old city. In our church, we commemorate them every year at this time. We pray for their souls. And for us, they are 40,000 martyrs. So when they invaded, they were the Arab minority. And the old city of Damascus, everyone spoke Greek because, as I said, it was the Byzantine Empire. Everyone belonged to Constantinople. And they were the Greek-speaking Christian majority. Now, what do we still have from this era or from this period of time? Of course, we have manuscripts. Theodosius back then was the emperor of Damascus, and he built this John the Baptist Church of Damascus in 379 AD, currently known as the Umayyad Mosque. So next time you're in Damascus, make sure to visit the Umayyad Mosque. You will still see Christian engraving on the stone right outside the mosque, which was a cathedral. You can still see it. It's Greek letters emphasizing words from the Bible that are just left there. You can see them. And Greek manuscripts are also found inside this church. What are these manuscripts? Well, they basically show that the Greek-speaking majority used the Greek alphabet to learn Arabic. So, for example, I can read Arabic. I'll read the top right first word, lidhalika, which means and for. And you can see, if anyone knows Greek, lidhalik. This is how they learned Arabic, using Greek alphabet. Christians in the Middle East today, from the Syrian point of view, due to the 11-year crisis in Syria, many churches were destroyed and many icons were stolen and disfigured. I'll briefly show you a few pictures. Of course, this is always heartbreaking. We saw a lot of pictures from other colleague speakers today. Early Christian Syrian saints of the Greek Orthodox Church that everyone in this room knows and is familiar with. Saint Cosmas, Saint Joseph the Damascene, Saint Ignatius of Antioch, Saint Luke the Evangelist, who wrote part of the Bible, Saint Thecla of Ma'lula, Saint John Chrysostom, Saint Meletius of Antioch, Saint John of Damascus, Saint Ephraim the Syrian. And just to mention, Saint Joseph the Damascene was a priest praying in St. Mary Cathedral, which is the cathedral that belongs to the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. It's right next door from my office. And in the 16th century, there was an attack on this church. He was killed along with everyone in the church who was praying that day. It's worth mentioning that up until 2015, Syria did not witness mass migrations of Christians. The majority stayed in Syria. Today, half of Christian population left, the least of which are Greek Orthodox Christians. Of course, the Greek Orthodox Christians are the largest denominations in the Middle East. Today, the most vulnerable Christians who are in need feel discriminated. Now I'm going to enter a little bit into humanitarian work. In most cases, they do not fulfill the criteria of the donor's humanitarian assistance. I'll give an example. In the organization I work in, and we're going to see this in a minute, we help 4 million people every year. Of course, geographically speaking, Syria is a Muslim country, and it's only normal that we help, let's say 90% of the beneficiaries are from the Muslim faith. This is just normal because this is, as I said, constitutes the population of Syria. But usually when we talk to the donors, we ask that, if we can help Syrians, and usually the answer is no, you help everyone, and if there is a little bit of money left, then you can help the Christians with this money. Why are Christians in the Middle East left with very little support? If we go back in time, as I told you, if we look at the orange map, we can see that the Byzantine Empire was ruled and supported by Constantinople, including Damascus and all the coastal side going from the south to the north. However, today, we see that Syria is left alone under an Islamic rule, while the Armenian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, the Serbian Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, etc., they have their own support from their own Christian countries. Even in yellow, I highlighted, of course, the Catholic Church and the Vatican that also has its own support. Changes facing Christians living in the Middle East. Maybe a lot of people will say, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just, get on a plane, get on a boat and go? Truth is, a lot of people have migrated, but not all of them made it through. Even though the population of Syria decreased by 20%, a lot of them died on the way to other safer countries. And those who made it are now stuck thinking, should I stay in the East? Should I go back to the West? What should I do? And this is purely because lots and lots of refugees, maybe you know this in Europe, they don't have citizenship even after 11 years of residing in a country. Maximum, they will get a residency permit that's renewed if they get a job. If they're lucky enough to have some money saved and they can buy a house, they can get a permit. But not all of them can actually receive a citizenship after some time. Do I have enough time? Because I think it's already...
You most certainly do.
Okay. I'll be really quick now. I'm not going to go into detail about the crisis in Syria then. You all know what's happening in Syria with the prices increasing with the depreciation of the Syrian pound. One of the main challenges in humanitarian work, of course, is the sanctions. I'll not mention the rest. Maybe you have enough time to read them quickly. Helping, of course, the Syrians with non-restricted back donor politicized funding, so to say, will help them to survive, will really help their livelihoods. How is our church helping? We run the largest faith-based organization in Syria called GOPA DIRD. DIRD stands for the Department of Ecumenical Relations and Development. And we took the logo or the slogan of the Good Samaritan. He is the person who helped a stranger regardless of his background, race, religion, etc. Our mission, our vision, our values, you can check them out on our website. I'm not going to read all of this just to save time. Our capacity and access is as follows. We have 2,000 staff members, 44 offices, 43 centers. We work with 16 partners. We have 28 years of experience, and we help 4 million people every year. And we were given the certificate of being a low-risk organization, which means that we received a very, very high rating after being assessed by different partners. Our main offices, as you can see, are scattered literally all around the country. We work in rapid response, in early recovery, and in livelihood and sustainable development. And we have various programs that go from medical, health, shelter, wash, education, protection, etc. All that the beneficiary has to do is, of course, sign up and then receive the assessment that they have to undergo by our team visiting them in their homes and making sure that they really are in need. And of course, we never forget women and women empowerment. And the result is that we benefit 2.5 million direct beneficiaries every year and 4 million indirect. We have been leading in Syria in terms of peace building because through our 43 service centers, we bring people in from all different society strata, and we give them all sorts of activities, especially in psychosocial support. They come in as enemies, they leave as friends, and we have really been chosen, let's say, in different countries around the world as an example of an organization that has been able to conduct peace building. Helping Syrians, Christians stay in Syria is helping your brothers and sisters in Christ preserve the 2,000-year-old Mother Church. Because Christians have always been the authentic part of society, always the majority and never the minority. Thank you for listening, and sorry that I took more time. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for staying till the end. Now, we actually do still have plenty of time for our panel discussion and quick Q&A session. But before we move into the Q&A and kick things off, I'd just like to have one final round of applause for the entire panel for their amazing work and speeches today. Give it up. Now, to open things off, before we hand out the microphone and to give you time to think about your question, I'm going to get the debate started. I'm going to ask each of you to answer in whatever order you prefer the following question. All of you today either referenced explicitly or implicitly the media, the international, local, it doesn't matter, the media in general. And it's sort of true that if the media is not highlighting, for example, work of your charities, right, then you can't get donations from either local or international donors. If the media is not telling the stories of the martyrs, reflecting on your talk, Father Benedict, then, from a Christian perspective, their sacrifice is being known only to God, and it's not able to inspire all of those believers across the world. So I would like all of you to say, in a few sentences perhaps, what you think the role of the media ought to be, and where you think the media, either internationally or locally, is letting Christians in the Middle East down.
I don't think I need to tell Hungarians about the role of the media and what it's like in terms of telling the truth. The role of the media is to tell the truth. Journalistic integrity is about telling the truth. I think part of the problem is that for many in the media, who we know are very liberal and very secular, in fact, Christians are the enemy. We are homophobic, we are intolerant, hearing about tolerance. Christians are the enemy. So there's a reason why, for example, in Nigeria on Pentecost Sunday, when those 40 Christians were killed in Ondo Diocese, not a word was said on the BBC News that night. Not a word. There's a reason. So part of the job of us is, I think, to be a bit more muscular, a bit more challenging to our friends in the media, and ask them to do their job.
Thank you for this question. I've been working in the media since 25 years. And I can say a word about it. The good media has to be at the service of truth, beauty, and goodness. But unfortunately, in our times, we face fake news, we face paid media and stolen media and commercial media. That's why when money gets inside the media, and when the media is in the hands of politicals or commercials, it becomes fake news and distracting for the human. And here I am working in the Catholic media. I can say, with the Orthodox also media in the Middle East, we have to ask also our brothers and sisters in Hungary to help the media centers that we have. Sometimes we focus on projects such as building, restoring groceries, etc. And I had the opportunity also to tell this to His Excellency, the Prime Minister Urban, 3 years ago, that we need helps for the centers that it is for the media in order to allow the voice of Christians to reach everywhere. I welcome here my friend Solène, who is working today, who is working in the media since many years. She's working now in Budapest, and I invite all the agencies here to collaborate with her, as she has a good experience in the Catholic media inside the Vatican. Thank you very much.
I'm not expert in the media, especially when we have Father Rifat after 25 years. But as a normal person, I think that people normally look for the truth. And this is the role of the good media. But here in Hungary, in Budapest exactly, we launch a showroom which can people come and see as a result of different works for their livelihood. So people sometimes cannot see if that's true or not, but in such an effort, you can see, you can touch, so you can see the truth.
Yes, coming from a background of political science, I don't trust the media at all. We were taught that the media, in fact, academically speaking, it either works for the state or against the state, and both are not accurate, both are somewhat reverting from the truth. And I always advised my colleagues and friends, especially when it comes to a crisis around the world, not only in Syria, is to go there and see it for their own eyes. What you see with your own eyes can somewhat be labeled a truth, otherwise not. And when I went to Syria, it was 2016. when I was called to help. And Damascus was still being shelled. There were still bombs. I myself escaped quite a few bombs. And the only thing I can tell you is that media from both sides, state and non-state, were fake. Too exaggerated. Sometimes, as Father said, they wouldn't even tell the truth of what was going on. So I was really disappointed that the rest of the world had no idea what's really going on in Syria. It was too exaggerated. And some news was actually staged. And again, both sides. So if you want to really know the truth, be neutral. Do your own research. Try to get a ticket, get on a plane, and go to that area, of course, if it's safe, and try to see with your own eyes and interview the locals without anyone controlling what they have to tell you. Try to interview the locals and get as much information as you can. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, now I hope everyone has had time to think about their questions. We do have a microphone. We'll be handing it out for 2 or 3 rounds. So could I see some hands up?
Do I have the right to ask?
You have the right to ask and say whatever you wish. There's a microphone.
Thank you so much. 3 quick comments from positive way, actually, for the Sarah presentation, the great presentation. I wish, as long as you were talking about the relationship between the peasants and Muslims, I wish we'd have started with the most constructive and positive point in the relationship between Christians and Muslims, because text number 30 of Quran, one of 114 texts, it's called the peasants, Rome, Surah al-Rum. And it starts by telling Muslims in Medina Munawwara, by that time, that the peasants were defeated by the Persian. And in very few years, the peasants will defeat the Persian. And by that time, the whole believers and the whole world will become very happy. And that because both Muslims and Christian peasants were believers. So this is very important to start with that. In that. For Father Kelly, thank you for the great presentation and for reflecting on the misconceptual definition of martyr. Because in Islam, those who lose themselves, sometimes you cannot regard them as martyrs, because by that time, there were no bombs, no guns, no rockets, only sports. So the martyr is being defined by Prophet himself, is one who fights, is one who dies when he fights to maintain the word of Allah, of God. That is the only martyr. So this is the only definition. For Mr. Rafat, thank you also for the glorious presentation. And you talk about democracy as the only way to maintain societies in that realm. And I think sometimes we have to talk about a just regime. I admire and respect democracy. I live in Europe, and I respect democracy as a great regime in the whole history. But sometimes you get some problems, because in India has got a very old and sufficient democratic regime, but it does not help sometimes in maintaining the relationship between religions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so could we have our next question? And questions are preferable to comments, if there are any. Any more hands? Yep, I believe Mr. Rash, or Dr. Rash over there, right? Thank you.
Yes, again, great presentations by everyone. This is a question for Sarah. You moved to Syria in 2016 from a place that at that time was relatively stable. And I'm curious if you can tell us what was behind your decision to move to a place that was in the middle of a war and away from the comparative safety that you had. If you can, if you could tell us about that decision.
All right, I'll start quickly by answering your question, Doctor. if you notice, the example I gave was not from the Quran, rather it was what Khalid ibn al-Walid said to his men prior to invading the city of Damascus. And this can be Googled in the Arabic language. He literally said, I heard that the blood of Al-Rum was very sweet, and this is why I yearn for it. This is what he said. Since we're talking about violence, since we're talking about these topics, I wanted to mention this, which was taking place prior to the invasion and the massacre of 40,000 Rum in the old city of Damascus. Of course, I know what the Quran says and what the Quran states in terms of their respect, of course, of Christianity, etc. But this was just an example of how sometimes violence and the mentioning of blood can also be mentioned towards Al-Rum. As for your question, Stephen, I get asked this a lot. You have an EU passport, your parents live in Greek Cyprus, it's a very nice island. What would make you go to Syria? And it's a really straightforward answer. I studied politics in Lebanon, and I worked at the US Embassy of Beirut for 6 years to help refugees leave the Middle East and go and resettle in the US. And when my church called me, I was in Balamand Monastery, and I met the former head of Go Baderd, and he asked if I can join my church and help in this mission. And I can assure you my parents were against this move. So I prayed to God and I made a deal with him. I said, if you want me to go to Syria, make it safe. If not, make sure I don't go there by, whatever godly move. And I assure you, he made it really simple, really straightforward. And it also moves me because I'm a daughter of a Greek Orthodox priest. This is against my church, and it's my homeland, and it's my people. And I thought, instead of working in an embassy and help people resettle, maybe I can help them in their country, not to become refugees in the first place, just to be IDPs, internally displaced. And one quick point, I'm a big fan of the saints of our church, their stories. I read about them a lot. And I always think that if the 12 disciples of Jesus abandoned him, then we wouldn't have much today, would we, about Christianity? They stayed with him, even though they knew he was going to be caught, he was going to be crucified, they were going to be tortured, they were going to be sent to Rome. They knew all this, but did they stop? No, they didn't. And this is exactly what I felt when I was called to serve my church. I thought it was a sign. And I thought that if anything, God will protect me, and he did. So far, so good. If anything happens, you'll know, and thank you.
Yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming, and thank to all of our speakers, because this day has been very fruitful and very exciting, and we are very glad that you accepted our invitation in the name of, I say this in the name of the organizing group. So thank you very much for coming, and I hope to see you tomorrow at Julianna Taimoorazy's presentation at 1:00 in the gallery hall where you had the lunch. Thank you.